host Amy. I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Breathe, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar today, where we will be focusing on how to navigate change, especially with so much change going on right now, particularly for SMEs and HR. So I would love to introduce you to our wonderful speakers today. So I will first off hand it over to Juliet, please.
Thanks very much, Amy, and thank you so much for inviting me to be one of your speakers here today. I'm so pleased to be here with you all. Good morning, everyone. I'm Juliet Price, and I've been working in HR and employment law for 30 years. And 27 years ago, I founded Park City Consulting. Park City is an award-winning business whose purpose really is to partner with SMEs and larger companies, supporting them to deliver human resources services and health and safety consultancy services. And we really are the champion, really, for business owners and directors. We're really on your side, and senior managers, of course, giving you the control and the confidence that you've got a happy and a healthy workforce, and an environment and a culture where your people really thrive. And of course, importantly, the business delivers the results for its shareholders. So typically clients would outsource some or all of their HR function to Park City, including writing their contracts, policies, managing employee relations issues such as disciplinaries, grievances, redundancy, performance, attendance, also projects like pay benchmarking, induction, strategy. And I'm delighted to be joined today by one of our clients, Simon from Wellity. We're mutual clients of each other. And I was saying to Simon, it's never been a busier time really for HR professionals, because we had a huge raft of employment law introduced this year anyway. And then with the new government now introducing the new deal for working people. So lots to do.
Thank you so much, Juliet. That was brilliant. And Simon, we'd love your intro.
Thank you. And again, just like Juliet, it's an absolute privilege to be here today. Thank you very much to Breathe. My name's Simon Scott Nelson. I'm one of the co-founders of Wellity Global. And Wellity is a well-being consultancy that we're very proud to say has trained over 1 million people across 80 different countries, and dedicated to crafting tailored training solutions to organizations large and small. Training that's presented virtually or in person across all major cities. There are 450 different topics that are now available. And this goes back to Juliet's point about the wealth that we're covering here. Everything from stress, change, resilience, phone addiction, parents and children's mental health, and sexual harassment prevention training. So there's a very broad brush there. And really the need that organizations to support their staff, not only in their well-being, but to mitigate risks and look at work-related stress. We've got over 200 consultants now that can help organisations. I'm also co-founder of the Great British Workplace Wellbeing Awards and the International Advocate for Mental Health Training. Again, thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you both so much. So hopefully that gives everyone an insight into yourselves and what we'll be covering today. So a little more on what we're going to be looking at. What are the new trends that are shaking us all up? What's going on? The economic challenges, practical tips as well to help you all how to prepare for change, and looking at flexible workforce. So as always, we do like to hold a little poll. So we wanted to highlight what we'll be covering today, and we want to hear from you. So what is it? What are your burning questions? What is it you'd like us to cover? So if you could choose one of the following that should be appearing on your screen, we will then be able to have a little discussion about this and then really focus the webinar today on what it is that you need. So Wonderful. I can see people hitting buttons, which is great news for me. If you could submit those as quickly as you can, that would be perfect. But I know you're probably thinking, actually, I want to hear about all of this. So don't worry, we will be covering it all. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I can see they're still going up. So I'll just give it another few seconds. Good old technology.
Absolutely.
Fab. I'll just wait for a few more. Thank you so much, everyone. I can see you're all over it. Brilliant. Fabulous. Okie dokie. I think we have enough reactions there. We will pop on to the results. Okay. It's quite a clear vote there, understandably, for the time we're in. What do you think about that, Juliet and Simon?
Yeah, okay. That I wasn't expecting it to be 61% on legislative changes, but I was expecting that to come out on top, if I'm honest. You know, as I said earlier, this year, 2024, we've seen the biggest changes in employment law in a generation. Okay, so that's, you know, that's really significant. And this presents, for all businesses of all sizes, but perhaps particularly SMEs, it presents a real change management issue and, you know, a kind of rebudgeting and sort of cost management issue. So, you know, I think that's, you know, it doesn't surprise me that it's come out on top. But obviously being, you know, working in employment law, fear not, we're here to help.
Yeah, I had a whole presentation around economic changes and challenges. Right, I'll go. I didn't. No, I'm joking. It's no surprise to me as well that legislative changes, I mean, they're the things that really affect legally, financially, morally, a lot of organisations. And I think that perhaps is the fear as well, and the worry. I think it might come from two different places. One, if things aren't in place, but two, for those great workplaces, what can I do to align? What can I do to keep ahead of this curve as well? Because employees will be very, very aware of them, and it's just keeping that one step ahead. So I've got an old line, which is just action conquers fear. And I think the action, the education, the listening and the learning around legislative changes will hopefully just calm that fear slightly. That we can all work together and work through it. Practical tips to support your people, that really comes from the action part of the fear behind the legislative changes. I think like any new change, the unknowing is what creates that fear. And I think once we all get them out in the open, talk about them and discuss them with authenticity, with reality, and so that there are tangible outcomes and not regarded as fluffy or any of these other things, because these are serious legislative issues which will affect owners, HR and all employees. So it's great to see that emphasis there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, organisations that don't have an HR department will probably be hardest hit. You know, I'd urge those to seek help, you know, get some support from an HR company. You know, but even those with HR departments, you know, they're going to be stressed and stretched. You know, there's a lot of work to do. But as I say, fear not, we will simplify it for you, talk you through it. And, you know, I think that's on the next slide. We'll be covering that anyway.
Yeah, and I think it shows and demonstrates the audience perhaps that are here today. In terms of legislative changes, it might be HR and owners. And like Juliet said, we've got you, we support you, we see you and hear you. So it's just, let's work through this together.
Definitely.
Thank you both so much. Yes, you're quite right. Upcoming legislative changes. This is the first part of today. So just to give you some insights, everyone, these are some stats that were pulled from a recent Breathe report that we launched, and Simon and Juliet have kindly reviewed these, and they will be sharing their knowledge now. So please take it away.
Great, thanks, Amy. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see that employers in your research are most concerned about the new day one rights for employees. The Employment Rights Bill is the biggest piece of employment law in 30 years. This is what you need to know. I'll talk you through the key highlights, the main points that particularly will be relevant to SMEs and the audience today. So first of all, probably the biggest headline that you may have seen is that employees will have the right to claim unfair dismissal from day one of employment. Obviously, as you appreciate, at the moment, they have to have 2 years service before they can claim unfair dismissal at employment tribunal. This will become a day one right. So what they're talking about doing in the consultation that we've seen so far is potentially introducing statutory probationary periods. So what that'll mean is you'll make your recruitment selection, bring somebody in, and you'll have 6, potentially 9 months, that's been proposed, to actually assess the person during their probation period, allowing employers to kind of have an opportunity to fairly assess the employee and potentially dismiss fairly during that period. But this will mean much more careful monitoring of your recruitment processes and practices, and of the employees themselves during the probation period. Employers really will need to make significant changes in their working practices here, and they should really start thinking about upskilling managers now, so that managers are really confident in what the probation period is, how to go about assessing somebody, and particularly evidencing their performance during probation and recording it. Obviously, if you use Breathe software, this is really helpful because you can record all of your probation period meetings and one-to-ones on there. So that really helps with that. Just thinking also about day one rights, the proposal is that parental leave, paternity leave, and bereavement leave will become entitlements from day one for employees. As you may know, a few years ago, parental bereavement leave and pay was introduced, which allows employees up to 2 weeks paid leave, a statutory bereavement pay rate, which is £184.03 a week currently. The proposal is this will be extended to other bereavement. They haven't confirmed what other bereavement, in other words, what relationship the employee will need to have with the bereaved person, the deceased person, to actually claim the leave, but they're suggesting that it'll be a week's leave, potentially paid for that other bereavement. What are your thoughts so far, Simon?
Well, I completely agree with everything that you said in terms of the legislation. And the slide says, which piece of legislation is going to be the most challenging for your organisation to implement. So I think this goes back to the fear thing as well. I think organisations might fear legal responsibilities and liabilities to employee onboarding, to perhaps employees that they might have made a mistake in recruiting, etc. We've also heard that they might understand by that they're leaving as well, that there might be entitlement issues and challenges to authorities as well. But I think that, like all of these things, we understand the fears and the changes are positive. But I think throughout all of this is that really healthy two-way communication is going to be the key for positive buy-in. And we'll go on to see some of the ways that are coming in and what organisations can do in terms of flexible working, fairer contract terms, enhanced job security, etc. But I think the purpose of this is to see the challenges as well and try and see it through the audience's eyes, as you are doing with all of this change coming all at once, and perhaps some aren't prepared.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I can see in the question boxes, people are asking about dates and things. It's a brilliant question. And I wish I could give you the answer to that. Obviously, we've already had a huge number of employment law changes this year already. We've got one coming up this Saturday, which I'll talk you through in a minute. But in terms of things like the bereavement leave, obviously bereavement leave parental bereavement leave is already a right for employees from day one anyway. That's parental bereavement leave, paid at the statutory rate of £184.03, as I mentioned, paid by the employer. That was another question. But the rest of it, the government set out their 100-day plan. I don't know if you remember them announcing this back in the summer. Their 100-day plan, they intimated that all of it would be introduced within the 100 days, which is now, the 100 days is up this month. But clearly, this volume of employment law, they can't introduce it all at once. So the talk is that it'll be introduced gradually over the next couple of years. So some will come in straight away, potentially, straight away perhaps being April 2025. And then the usual statute process for employment law is April and October. Whether this new government will stick to that, those implementation dates, we don't know yet. It's still in consultation, but when it gets to consultation stages, we can predict this is definitely coming in. We just don't know when. Okay, and all of the kind of detail. So just to then sort of move on to what else it brings in. So it brings about an end to 0 hours contract. So what they're looking to introduce, and this is going to be really significant, if you're an employer and you're in your business, you have lots of people on 0 hour contracts, this really affects you. So what it'll do, they're going to introduce a new provision called guaranteed hours. So basically what it means is it's a one-sided 0 hours opportunity in the employee's favour. So if the employee wants 0 hours, that's fine. If they don't, and they're working a regular pattern of hours, they'll have the guaranteed right to be offered that as a contractual entitlement. So if they're working 12 hours a week, they're entitled to a contract that says, and obviously this isn't me saying this is the legislation that's being introduced. They'll also have the right to reasonable notice for shifts and changes to shifts. This one we do suspect probably may well come in next year. But all of these things, you kind of think to yourself, well, that's a long way off. Well, actually, it isn't in HR terms, because if we've got to be changing people's contracts, we've got to go through consultation, etc. So it's really good to get ahead of the game and get your house in order and prepared. They're also going to be ending the fire and rehire practices. This means that it'll be automatically unfair to dismiss an employee if they refuse a variation to their contract terms. So again, there'll be a process to follow to make those sort of changes, which involves consultation, etc. Also from day one of employment, the Employment Rights Bill makes flexible working an automatic right. As you know, at the moment, employees have the right to request flexible working and a couple of opportunities each year to do so, but it will become automatically they have the right to work flexibly. And what the bill says is that employers can only refuse it if they can prove it's unreasonable, the request is unreasonable. Okay, so that's quite a big change. The bill also makes it stronger protection around dismissal for pregnant workers, so pregnant and new mothers, in fact. It's expected this protection will extend to pregnant employees and for 6 months after their return to work to protect them from dismissal. Written statements of employment particulars, also known as the contract of employment. These will also need to include a clause in that says you have the right to join a trade union. As we know, this new government is very, very pro trade unions, so that is going to be included. There'll be significant changes to SSP, statutory sick pay. Again, this will be a day one right, which basically means the government are going to remove the 3 waiting days. At the moment, as you know, there's 3 waiting days before the employee is entitled to be paid statutory sick pay. They're going to remove that, but also the lower earnings threshold. So this means that 1.3 million lower paid workers will now be eligible for statutory sick pay from day one of sickness. They plan to set it as either a percentage of pay or, a flat rate whichever is the lower. So again, that's, you know, further detail awaited on that. So potentially big costs for businesses, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, listening to this, Julia, as a member of the audience, then you can feel how daunting and how impactful these changes are. There is so much to consider. In terms of communication, I honestly think that with senior leadership teams as well is a great time to regroup before all this comes, to get people open to change and soften the landing when it comes to all this change as well. I think this gives a wonderful opportunity for teams to come together and say, look, where have we been? Where are we now? And where do we want to go? And we have to sort of get used to the words around change, which is the purpose of this webinar with so much coming on as well. With cultures that are perhaps, you know, this is how we've always done it, this is how we're always going to do it. I think this is a wonderful time to go back to the table, adjust and become empathetic to new working landscapes as well, because there is so much to take in there. And if we're not open to these changes, there will be resistance from day one. So I think that psychological safety within the teams to say that we are about to enter a period of change, of big change. If we were doing a SWOT analysis on the business, taking me back to my school days, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, it would be very easy to look at this and think, well, what are the weaknesses and opportunity to threats to how we are now? But of course, the opportunities and the strengths of all this, when we think could be long-term benefits from attracting staff retention, employee retention, a more healthy working culture, more diverse teams. But I do appreciate reading this and hearing this through the eyes and ears of the audience, that there is just so much to take in. So I would go one change at a time and precede that with an openness with the team that we are entering big times of change again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Simon. So other changes, gender pay gap and menopause. There's going to be an increased obligation on employers with 250 employees or more on gender pay reporting, and also they will need to submit their menopause action plans. They'll need to write action plans to support employees through their menopause journey at work, and they'll need to support those along with their gender pay gap reporting. There's also protection. You must have heard about the changes to sexual harassment law. So there's protection from sexual harassment. As you know, this comes in this Saturday, the 26th of October. Saturday seems strange. Employers have a new duty to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. This will be extended to employers having a duty, as I've said, to take all reasonable steps. Okay, so as of this Saturday, it's reasonable steps, and that's extending to all reasonable steps. So there is a definition of what the reasonable steps are. Get in touch with me and we can send that to you or go through that with you. But basically, all your policies will need updating. These are some of the steps in summary. Update all your policies, conduct a workplace risk assessment, set up clear processes to communicate the changes in sexual harassment, build awareness in your organisation, communicate what it means. So this proactive duty on employers to prevent sexual harassment at work, and not just in the workplace, but during work. And make sure that you document everything that you're doing. Again, if you have the Breathe software, you can use that for communicating out your policies, sending out announcements to raise awareness. And of course, you've got to be training all of your workforce in what this means, anti-harassment, and also particularly your managers, so that they understand really clearly. And, start at the C-suite. We must be starting with the leaders of the organisation, because if they're walking the walk and demonstrating as leaders what this means in practice, then, that obviously that will filter down through the organisation. Simon and I did a webinar on sexual harassment earlier in the year. So again, you'd be welcome to have the recording of that, so that where I walk through that in much more detail. Yeah, I think that sort of covers most of the legislation there. Simon? anything you want to add?
Yeah, just on that last point around sexual harassment prevention training, I would say that with the organisations that we work with in the UK, and there are many, it is probably 10 to 15% of the entire book training at the moment, because compensation can be increased by up to 25% as well. So this is where appropriate behaviours really find their way, appropriate and inappropriate behaviours really find their way into the boardroom through a different door, through the second door of financial, legal and moral issues if it isn't adhered to. And again, like Juliet said, all reasonable steps. Worthy of note is sexual harassment. Approximately 40% of women and 18% of men experience unwanted sexual behaviour. The training actually goes far deeper than what was kind of regarded once as the old school interpretation of sexual harassment prevention. This is a very modern approach to the overt behaviours, subtle behaviours, and online behaviour. So this can be gifts, this can be memes, this can be same-sex relationships. This is looking at the whole protocol for how people can feel that that there is sexual harassment. And so we're exploring the legal frameworks, yes, but there is an absolute zero tolerance now. And Juliet, you are spot on when you say that this needs to go to senior teams initially, because there is a concern that with all this change brought in, this is just another thing from HR. This is just another thing. What have we got to do now? Line managers have got so much pressure at the moment, a duty of responsibility from beneath, a duty of care for KPIs and the business case as well. Heaven forbid their own lives coming in at the side as well. So they have to be aligned to, if all of the employees are saying, well, who's done this? It's quite a sort of finger pointy thing. Who's done what? Why are we bringing this in? No, this is an open door now to talk about appropriate behaviours by way of legislation. So it does the hard work of saying we have to do it, but it also opens the door to things like unconscious bias, thing about appropriate behaviours, about anti-bullying, and these can all be referenced in the training. So the manager's training first, and there's a 2-hour session on managers to align why we're doing it, what are your responsibilities to your organisation, and what is, and obviously it's a good thing to do. And then there's all employees, which is, what is it now in this modern day and age? How is it perceived? What can I get in trouble for? And what's happening? That needs to be aligned. And then an e-learning hour as well, just for everyone to go those complete reasonable steps. But I would say this initially, and this is why I go back to the thing about taking one step at a time and not trying to see everything come in at once.
Certainly. Okay, so support to implement what's available. My advice would be you definitely need to get some HR support, you know, from whatever perspective, whether that's employing someone, whether that's outsourcing, you know, just get some support. Free, what's out there that's free, first of all? So in terms of free guidance, obviously there's the government website. Really all that does, though, is set out the legislation and tell you what it says. Then you've got ACAS, which goes into a little bit more detail and gives you some codes of practice and a little bit more guidance for free on the ACAS website. Go on to Park City's website. We've got lots and lots of resources that you can download for free, checklists, guide, you know, top 10 tips and guidance notes for free on there. You know, get in touch, because I think it's updating the policies that we can do for you, but also obviously conducting manager briefings. And I think, you know, as Simon and I have said, starting with the C-suite, with the directors and the leaders of the organisation, sometimes that message is better delivered from someone that's not within the business, because, you know, going in and explaining to the C-suite there's these changes in legislation, sometimes it can provide you know, that sort of emotional gap, if you like, if it's delivered by an external advisor to the business. So that can often help. The Breathe software, again, really helps. We're a huge advocate for Breathe software. We're a platinum partner with Breathe. That means that we've successfully implemented it and installed it in many, many organisations. And it really does help with the management of the documentation. Whenever there's a change piece of legislation, we can update the policies and send them out via the software. So it kind of takes care of all the administration tasks when we have lots of HR changes. Yeah, I mean, I can see lots of questions coming in, but I guess we're going to handle those sort of later into the presentation. Maybe, I don't know if anything you want to add on this slide, Simon, or whether we're moving on.
Well, only to agree with you, obviously, about Breathe and Park City, definite go-tos. And the reason why we're here, and they can both speak with complete authority on this. I'll double down on the 40% there, training for leaders and managers as well, because line managers at the moment are really, really feeling the pressure. I can't underestimate that. There is so much coming at them. In terms of their responsibility to the wider team as well, it's interesting to know that 60% of employees worldwide say their job is the biggest factor of affecting their mental health. This is relevant when you say managers have just the same impact on their team's mental health as their spouse, which is 69%, the doctor, 51%, and therapists, which is 41%. They have a huge effect on people's mental health. Now, if we combine this at a time where 82% of managers are accidental, you might have heard this, they're accidental. They're finding themselves in positions of authority by default or because they've got there, especially if other people have left and they may be carrying the work of two. So they haven't had the training to cope with the responsibilities that they're now in. This can lead to all sorts of behaviors. People can shout louder because they've got imposter syndrome. They can try and discipline people without the right. They might be unempathetic or have the softer skills around conversations. How hard is it to have an awkward conversation with someone if, one, you're not sure and you've never been trained, and there may be an outcome that might be bad for you, and two, you're just not feeling psychologically safe enough to be able to put your hand up and think, I'm going to take one for the bosses and the team here. I think this is the way they would like me to handle it. Well, what if it isn't? And what if someone else has had ramifications for doing that in the past? So psychological safety for 82%, the managers, which is 82% accidental, seeing it through their eyes, seeing that they've got more responsibilities now, and they might be finding it hard to cope, keeping an eye on their mental health as well. And in all this, we bear in mind the responsibilities of the business to hit number as well. So there's a heady mix there when it comes to training, down to really psychological safety of line managers for me.
Thanks, Simon. Shall we look at the economic challenges now? So I can see that they're up there on the screen there. So when I sort of analysed this, I noticed that one of the 28% on there, 28% of employers believe that the cost to their business of changes in government policies per employee could be as much as £250 to £500. So if, for example, you're an SME that employs 50 people, that's an additional cost to your business of between £12,500 and £25,000 per annum. You know, particularly when you think that businesses are already managing rising costs, the rising cost of hiring people, retaining people, rising salary costs due to cost of living, etc. And then the government are now talking, obviously we're really awaiting their budget next week, I think it is, next Wednesday. But the government are talking about introducing NI contributions for employers on pensions. You know, this would be a direct 13.8% increase in cost for all employers. You know, it's just not something that businesses can afford to do. You know, I mentioned earlier that the increase in SSP, and other employment law changes, these will also be an immediate cost. But I think the point is that with these economic challenges related to change, you know, some of them we have control over, but some of them we don't. When it's a government policy imposed on us, you know, we don't have control over that. So, you know, that's where, as Simon said, you know, action is the best fear buster that there is. So, you know, planning now for these changes rather than waiting until they say, OK, it's from the 1st of April, 6th of April, 2025, planning ahead for it now, taking action in your organisation, that's going to take a lot of the fear and stress away because you're acting upon the information being given. Simon, anything you want to add?
Well, you've taken my phrase, action conquers fear, and you've made it better with fear buster. And it is. It really is. It's the same, you know, when you talk about cost of living and we've got envelopes coming through the door and you don't want to open them, they don't look nice. And that doesn't help. And we need to open the envelopes and just have a look. And again, laying the land for change, getting used to the narrative. This isn't how it used to be. This is new. Are we all open and adaptable to change? Look, we understand times are very hard and hard for SME owners. You know, a recent survey of 500 small to medium-sized enterprises, 31% of business anticipated closing by the end of 2024. In the last 5 years, 28.6% of UK businesses have closed. We get it. There's extra cost. As I say, we're only delivering this information. But I think where it can be softened at all is just dissecting each change and looking at perhaps a cost centre for each one of those. Again, going back to that SWOT analysis, the opportunities and the strengths. Yes, there is more accountability legally, greater responsibility. It's a really tough mix. But training, employee empowerment, communication, accountability, and cash forecasting are going to be extremely necessary. It may be that some of the other things that you had planned, that's the budget that's going to be put towards this. But it just, like you say, open the envelope, read it, digest it, and get the team ready for change. I think with all this change, this is a mini crisis to SMEs in terms of so much change happening over such a short space of time. So divulging that information and using action as a fear buster. I like that.
So supporting your people, Simon, do you want to kick off on this one?
Yeah, supporting your people, obviously seeing the person in the people as well. This is going to mean very different things to all individuals. All the changes will see different ramifications for those individuals on the other side, the employees who might see these as incredibly positive things. So I think when we're constructing the conversation to them, it's to listen, it's to active listen and engage. Again, plenty of training on that. Have a two-way conversation. The word of the year, the Collins Dictionary word of the year in 2022 was permacrisis. And the definition of permacrisis is describing the feeling of living through a period of war, inflation, political instability. Additionally, now we have parents and children's mental health, financial anxiety, cost of living, and employees are definitely feeling the pressure. They may see some of these things as a wonderful opportunity to be flexible and perform better, and it might be completely great for them. In which case, we do need to listen to, like I say, really open that two-way conversation. The risk of burnout is prevalent. And again, the definition of burnout is resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And that's the thing there. The symptoms to anxiety, stress, more importantly, to burnout for leaders to be aware of: exhaustion, emotionally depleted, physically tired and overextended. That can come from people, again, covering workspaces where people have chosen to leave or have been promoted into a position. There is a risk that costs might be cut and people might be doing two people's jobs to alleviate some of these costs as well. So those are certainly things to be very aware of. Training here is sort of coping with change, distress to de-stress, but working over that conflict which can appear, and that's the psychological safety for people to feel open enough And these changes may work for people. They need to say that these are working for me as well and be met with. There might be cynicism, people might be disengaged, negative about job, feeling incompetent, low self-evaluation or minimized accomplishments. There is a lot to do, Juliet. There is a lot to take in above and beyond these changes. But I think that communication and laying the land and having that two-way empathetic listening, really active listening to people's changes, because everyone's going through so much at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think, leaders really do play a crucial role, particularly at a time of change, in supporting each other and also their management team. It's very important we don't forget the managers in all of this. They're dealing with the employees and supporting their people that work within their teams, but also it's supporting the managers. And, that's why we're here. We're a critical friend to business, and we're here to support, directors and managers through this. So, get in touch about that. And building, as Simon said, a culture of well-being, and psychological safety, so people can say when they're not feeling okay, and it's okay to not be okay, and sort of managing that. So, what about preparing your teams then, Simon? Shall we look at that?
Yeah, and this leads on nicely to our audience as well. HR line managers, SME owners are feeling the pressure as well. It's hard for people who have got to make the changes. I just want to go back a step as well and acknowledge the pressures that our audience might well be feeling at the moment, completely overwhelmed. There are many sessions about looking after our own well-being before change. There's an O2, which is looking after yourself, putting on your own oxygen mask first, prevalent with HR leaders at the moment before going into such change. And I think this is a time for HR networks to come together. Much like we have speak up champions within organizations. So if you go through mental health first aid training, you form a bond, you get a group, and you can work forward with regular check-ins. I honestly think now is a time for HR leaders to come together cross-sector, cross-industry, and say, with all the HR networks that are out there, and say, look, how are you feeling? What are we going through? What are you prioritizing first? And look after your own well-being, because this is the equivalent of 50 years of change coming in one fell swoop. And I just don't want to underestimate how overwhelmed, high anxiety levels to get it right as well, especially with overperformers and people who are very empathetic, which is half of HR, and listening to the needs of people. There will be a case of release. So in terms of preparing your teams, I would say prepare yourselves first, join an HR network, get together, go to Breathe, go to Park City Consulting, look at the legislation, and then break it down to bite-sized elements. Communication is just so key on this point. And by that, I keep going back to psychological safety. How are you meant to have all the answers to these questions? These are questions that change by the day nowadays. There are new ones coming in all the time. The only way you can do it is by looking around cross-sector, cross-industry, and looking at best practice within that field. So as always, our door's always open, Park City's always open. If you'd like to get any advice or training around communication, coming together, checking groups, and obviously the legislation. But we do understand feedback as well when we're communicating with teams needs to be two-way. It needs to suit the employee. Be aware of diverse challenges. Be aware of neurodiversity. Be aware of the situation empathetically with open listening. The opportunities, allowing staff space to heal, return to work more focused and productive, contributing to a compassionate and understanding working culture. Be very aware of impact and intent on impact. Our intent might be that these are good things. The impact might be catastrophic for the person on the other side. So that brings in the active listening. And effectively, proactively recognize and work around work-related stressors. They are everywhere. Define psychosocial risk management and its significance, insight into work-related issues, but really understand the pivotal role of yourself and managers, and look after yourself first.
Mm. Yeah, and I think, as Simon said, plan and communicate with really clear communication channels. Leaders really need to articulate the reasons for the change, and be open and honest. We're not going to have all of the answers all of the time, and it's okay to say so. It's really about being present, being available for people to ask questions. Maybe consider having regular kind of town hall meetings with your people. Even if it's just to be there, to be visible and hear their questions. And I think, Simon covered all of the other elements on there really, really well. Maybe the only thing I'd add, perhaps consider some change champions in the business from all cross sectors of the business and people that can support, encouraging people to ask their questions and give reassurance, really.
Yeah, I agree, and constant monitoring as well, because there's a lot being thrown at people. So regular check-ins, completely agree with you.
Yeah. And it's, the journey of managing change is a real challenging one. It really requires kind of experienced navigation, doesn't it? But with these challenges, the opportunity for growth here is significant, both for those of you that are leading in this time of change, but also for the organisation to learn and develop and grow. So that's, a great opportunity, I think.
Yeah, hindsight is the only perfect science. We'll look back at these changes and think, okay, well, this is the way we work now. And, there may be industries that are really ready for this change. This might be the legislative issues that can enforce or help support HR leaders and SME leaders enforce change within the organisation. And I think it's important to reiterate that this is change for good long term. And this is the hotspot where it's all happening.
Absolutely. Sure. Shall we look at flexibility? I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and, kind of rattle through some of this. But, in today's rapidly changing environment, flexibility isn't a perk anymore. It's become a necessity within the workplace. And for SMEs and HR professionals, this does create a challenge navigating this shift. But it also can be a real game changer for your business, because offering flexible working options really makes you a far more attractive employer. It gives you the opportunity to retain your people and make them much more productive while they're with you. So some options on the slide there, you can see obviously flexible hours, giving people the flexibility on their start and finish times helps them to balance their personal responsibilities like school drop-offs or caring, or just letting the washing machine man in to fix the washing machine or whatever it is, really can reduce absenteeism and create greater job satisfaction. The 4-day work week and compressed hours in some respects can be seen as the two sides of the same coin. The 4-day working week obviously potentially is compressing the hours that you would do over 5 days into 4. Challenges around this, unless everybody does it, it creates a challenge for those organisations that obviously are customer facing, because then you've potentially got to introduce shifts to cover, the 5 days across your 4-day working people. Compressed hours, so as well as this being 5 days hours into 4, this could also be things like 6 days on, 3 days off. It can be different working patterns, different shift patterns, where you can compress both a full-time employee's hours and a part-timer's into fewer days. Remote working, obviously, this gained huge prominence during the pandemic, didn't it? But allowing employees to work from anywhere, that is a huge challenge for HR. Anywhere, does that mean, if I've got a holiday home in Dubai, I haven't, but if someone had, does that mean letting them work from there? There's all sorts of tax implications around those sorts of things. So, that's a word of caution. But remote working in terms of working from home, where in this country, can create increased productivity and reduce, obviously, office overheads and things, and improve work-life balance. And hybrid working, you know, as we know, inside and outside of the office, having a combination of that, you know, really allows employees to feel good about what they're doing. In terms of the business needs, obviously, that's equally as important. The business has to deliver what it needs to deliver. And of course, you know, it's still really important for people to have face-to-face collaboration, both with each other and customers, if that's part of their role. So important to bear that in mind. And obviously, job sharing, as it's shown on there, can be really useful. Two people sharing one full-time role can be an excellent solution for employees who have personal commitments, you know, and that provides some flexibility. And of course, appointment flexibility. So this is where we're giving people the flexibility to have, you know, a doctor's appointment, a personal appointment, to do something, you know, let the washing machine man in to fix the washing machine, things like that, giving them the flexibility to do that and make up their working hours at another point, or work from home during the event. But again, using Breathe. Breathe has an excellent flexible working, you know, a module within there which allows employees to make the requests, the flexible working requests, and supports managers in having those one-to-ones with people and recording it all on there. So it just takes the administration and record-keeping hassle away, really. So that's quite useful.
Agree with everything you've said there, and only to complement what you've said is to see the person in the people. We do a huge amount of disc profiling with SMEs at Wellity, and it is amazing how when you find where someone is on that disc profiling, how they want to work. We know at Wellity Global, we have people that start working at 5 o'clock in the morning because they want to, because it suits them, because they're up and they're ready and they're productive. Equally, we have people that work late into the evening. The productivity of our organisation has rockets because of that. And I imagine that would do the same once we identify how people want to work under the guise of the responsibilities within the business as well. So that disc profiling I would recommend to any SME, to find out how your workers like to work. And the only other thing I'd say is ask, because they all look, you know, terrific on there, but a 4-day week might be terrible for someone's circumstances. An overachiever would just fill the 5th day as well, or even if they were off in their mind at risk of burnout, for example. So that I would just ask the person, how are you best to work? How are you most productive? Keeping in mind the overall logistics, obviously, and the safeguarding of the business intentions, but ask everyone, and especially as a leader, HR, SME leader, line manager, profiling your team as well can let you know, okay, they don't want to work those hours not because they don't want to work those hours, it's because they want to work so much more effectively and efficiently when they've got a clear mind at a different part of the day. So bear in mind compressed hours and hybrid working works for some, doesn't for others. Ask the team. Right.
Amy, Q&A.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I feel like this has been an amazing session. I'm sure everyone can agree it's gone too quickly. Yes, we would love to get into the Q&A. So the first question up we've got here is, will all contracts need to be updated and reissued to reflect these new laws? Or can we update employee handbook and implement the changes as they arise?
Yes, to both of those elements of the question. So the contracts will need to be updated with the, you know, you have the right to join a trade union. That will be an absolute update to the contracts. Some others, it depends on what it says in your contract at the moment. But yes, you can definitely be updating policies as and when it comes in, you know, and drip feed that through the business and communicate it as those changes arise. So yes, yes to both of those elements of that question.
Thank you.
Is that for me? A reasonable request for flexible working?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So would you be able to explain an example of an unreasonable request for flexible working? Yes, they've already said that, for example, a financial reason is potentially an unreasonable request. So if, for example, the employee's requesting some sort of flexible working that's going to cost the business money to say yes to, then that potentially would be a reason that you could refuse it. You know, we just can't afford that particular request. But get in touch if you've got a flexible working request that you want us to look at with you. And obviously we can provide some more detail and answer that directly. Not being able, shall I do the next question? Please, can you speak a bit about more detail about not being able to dismiss if people refuse a contract change? So yes, does this still apply if there's consultation? So obviously if you're making, the fire and hire regulations is really where the organisation's making a mandatory change, firing people and then rehiring them on new terms and conditions. Okay, if you're wanting to change an employee or a department, if you're making a departmental restructure, for example, that you can still do through consultation. So it's consulting with the employees, talking to them about what the changes might be, hopefully getting agreement and implementing. Whereas fire and rehire is dismissing and employing on the new terms. Sexual harassment. So when do businesses have to provide this training and create these policies by? Okay, so for sexual harassment, this comes in on this Saturday, 26th of October. So you really need to be working on that really right now as your priority. So sexual harassment, you need to be updating all of your harassment policies, looking at your disciplinary processes, making sure that you're making employees aware of what the changes are. Because the legislation says that the employer has the duty of care to proactively prevent sexual harassment from taking place with its employees. So this is about awareness raising, updating policies, and that is priority right now. So that is coming in.
Regarding the training on that, Juliet, I absolutely agree. I mean, as part of a training program from before, but if not, the next time is today. So the Wellity training that we can book in can be booked in 2 weeks' time. Managers can be looked at, all employees can be looked at. E-learning turnaround can be 4 to 6 weeks, but I'd say that's completely bespoke to the organisation. We get that booked in. Like Juliet said, it's in on Saturday. It's here, it's amongst us. Best practice would say do it anyway. Legislation says we must. So for a quick turnaround, obviously, just let us know.
Next question, we're a remote working company but have team working days once a month. Can we insist staff attend the team working day if their contract states they work from home? So in that case, I would suggest adding into the contract, discussing with the employees that it's really important to have that day together once a month, the benefits around it for them and the business and their role and each other. Talk to them about it, and you can add that into their contract, or just make it part of their working requirements, a part of their job spec. So ideally we want people to be wanting to come in for that meeting because it's important for part of their, fulfilling their role.
I agree. They work fantastically for morale and communication as well, maybe even to deliver some of the information around these changes, team bonding, as I say, and they're extremely powerful. Especially in these times of change, might just be brought into that process.
Yes, definitely. Amy, I don't know whether do you want me to go on to the next one? So with regard to adding in the clause, the right to join a trade union, when does this need to be added? Is this with immediate effect? No, not with immediate effect. We expect that will be one of the first ones to come in though. So when we get more detail on that, we rather suspect that will probably be April next year. So start sort of planning and thinking about that now. I can also see people saying please can it be made crystal clear what's already been implemented and what's due to be. If you pop onto Park City's website, there is a list of all the legislation that's already come in this year. But I'd be really happy to do a legislation update, Amy, in another webinar if you want me to, if that's helpful. Entirely up to you.
Yes, please. I can feel that everyone's so excited about today, and everything has been incredible. So thank you so much to Juliet and Simon, and we will definitely be getting them back for round 2. I can just feel it now. And yeah, I'm so sorry if we haven't been able to get to your questions. Of course, today we've managed to squeeze into not much time. So please do reach out to Juliet and Simon. You should be able to see their LinkedIn link. So pop the message, connect with them, use the resources they've kindly shared with us as well. It's just been an absolutely wonderful session. So huge thank you to Juliet and Simon. And of course, thank you so much everyone for joining. It's just been absolutely brilliant session. And in case you are wondering what's going on with the budget next week, what do I need to know? We do have a live Q&A next Thursday at 10 a.m. So you should be able to see a link, sign up, and we'll get ready to answer your questions as best as we can for that session. So thank you again so much for joining us, Simon and Juliet, and thank you everyone for joining today, and we'll see you very soon.